In the heart of a distant planet, where the sky often danced with swirling colors of violet and emerald, stood a small, run-down house that somehow managed to retain its charm. Inside, the walls creaked and groaned, whispering stories of resilience and history. The air was thick with the smell of oil and metal, remnants of the mechanical projects that Grace Kim, a humble mechanic, had devoted herself to over the years. Her hands were skilled and calloused, each scar a testament to the countless hours spent repairing and perfecting machines that most had given up on. As the winds began to pick up outside, Grace glanced at the darkening sky through the cracked window. The storm was approaching, and she could feel the tension in the air, heavy and charged. The anticipation was palpable, prickling her skin as she grabbed her toolbox from the corner of the room. If you are enjoying this story, don't forget to subscribe to the channel. She had learned long ago that preparing for storms was not just about fortifying her home, it was about ensuring her own peace of mind. She stepped outside, the wooden porch creaking under her weight, and surveyed the roof. It was old and weary, with shingles curling at the edges and gaps that promised leaks when the rain began to pour. Grace took a deep breath, inhaling the earthy scent of rain-soaked soil, and climbed up the rickety ladder to get a closer look. Her heart raced with determination. Fixing the roof was a challenge she embraced. It was her sanctuary, the place she poured her energy into, and she refused to let it succumb to nature's wrath. The wind picked up, howling through the trees lining her property, as Grace pulled out her tools. A wrench, a hammer, and a roll of duct tape were her weapons of choice. Each tool was familiar, almost like an extension of herself. She surveyed the damage with a keen eye, her mind calculating the best way to patch the leaks. As she worked, she hummed softly, a melody only she could hear, lost in the rhythm of her labor. With each shingle she adjusted, the sky grew darker, swirling clouds looming ominously overhead. The first drops of rain began to fall, spattering against the roof like tiny drums echoing a warning. Grace quickened her pace, her determination igniting as she felt the cool droplets on her skin. She was almost there. The sound of thunder rumbled in the distance, a reminder that time was running out. The tension in her muscles mirrored the brewing storm, and she pushed herself harder, her focus unwavering. Suddenly, a loud crash echoed through the air, causing Grace to pause. She looked around, trying to locate the source of the noise. The trees swayed violently, branches snapping like dry twigs. Her heart raced as she realized she had to finish her task. Just as she began to return to her work, a sense of dread washed over her. This storm was different, it felt more aggressive, more alive. The rain began to pour down in earnest, soaking her clothes and drenching the ground. Grace wiped her forehead with the back of her hand, a small smile creeping onto her lips despite the chaos around her. This was her world, her home, and she would do everything in her power to protect it. She tightened the last screw, securing the final shingle in place, and stepped back to admire her handiwork. The roof looked solid, and for a moment, she felt a sense of accomplishment wash over her. But as the winds howled louder, a deep rumble of thunder echoed above, and Grace's smile faded. The storm was intensifying, and she needed to secure the last of the loose panels before it became impossible to do so. With one final glance at the sky, she gathered her tools and carefully descended the ladder, her heart pounding with the urgency of the moment. Inside, the storm raged on, wind battering against the walls and rain pelting the windows. Grace could feel the house trembling, its very foundation shaking under the force of nature's fury. She set her tools down and took a deep breath, allowing herself a moment to gather her thoughts. She had patched the roof just in time, but the battle was far from over. The storm had other plans, and she could feel it in her bones. As the rain poured down, the sounds of the storm enveloped her, a symphony of chaos and power. Grace leaned against the wall, listening to the rhythm of the rain and the howl of the wind. It was a reminder of how small she was in the grand scheme of the universe, yet also how fiercely she fought for her place within it. Suddenly, there was a knock on her door, startling her from her reverie. Who could it be in this weather? With curiosity piqued and concern creeping in, she made her way to the door, her heart racing again. She opened it cautiously, revealing a figure standing in the rain, soaked and shivering. It was Zektar, her neighbor, a single father and a being of a different world, with skin that shimmered like the surface of a star. "Grace," he shouted above the roar of the storm, his voice filled with urgency. "I was just passing by and saw you on the roof." The storm is worse than predicted. You need to get to safety. Grace stared at him for a moment, her mind racing. Zektar was known for his logical approach to everything, always calculating risks and outcomes. But Grace was more instinctive, relying on her intuition rather than cold logic. I've got it covered, Zektar. I just finished patching the roof, she called back, trying to reassure him, but the wind howled louder, as if mocking her confidence. Let me help you. Zektar insisted, concern etched across his alien features. Their different cultures often clashed, his logical thinking versus her gut feelings, but in this moment, they both understood the stakes. The storm could wreak havoc on their homes and their lives. With the storm bearing down on them, Grace nodded, reluctantly accepting his help as fear mingled with gratitude. She stepped aside to let him in, realizing that together, they might stand a better chance against the tempest that loomed just outside their door. As they braced themselves for what was to come, Grace felt a flicker of hope. Perhaps, just perhaps, they could weather the storm together. The storm clouds gathered ominously in the distance, darkening the sky as they rolled in like a great wave ready to crash upon the shore. Grace stood at her kitchen window, her heart pounding as she watched the tempest approach. She had just finished patching the last of the roof shingles, but the ominous rumble of thunder reminded her that nature did not care for her efforts. The wind howled, shaking the very walls of her small home, and she could feel the tension in the air, thick and electric. Suddenly, a loud knock echoed through the house, startling her from her thoughts. Who could be out there in this weather? Grace hesitated for a moment, her heart racing. She opened the door a crack, peering outside. To her relief, it was Zektar, her neighbor from a few houses down. He stood there, rain-soaked and wild-eyed, his alien features stark against the backdrop of the brewing storm. Grace, he shouted over the howling wind. I saw you up on the roof. You need to get inside, it's going to get worse. She opened the door wider, inviting him in. I know. I just finished patching it, but I'm not sure it'll hold. The storm feels different this time. Zektar stepped inside, shaking off the rain like a wet dog. His skin shimmered under the dim light, a reminder of his alien heritage. You can't hold it back with just a few screws and nails. We need to work together if we want to keep your home safe. Grace raised an eyebrow, skeptical. Zektar was known for his logical approach to everything, a stark contrast to her instinctual methods. What do you mean? We should reinforce the roof from the inside, he replied, already moving toward her toolbox. I can help with the structural support. You know how to patch the exterior, let's combine our skills. She considered his words for a moment. Their different cultures often clashed, his logical thought process versus her intuitive understanding of mechanics. But perhaps, in this moment of crisis, their unique strengths could complement each other. All right, she said, determination filling her voice. Show me what you have in mind. Zektar began rummaging through her toolbox, selecting tools with care. Grace watched him, intrigued. He was methodical, choosing items as though he were calculating the odds of success. It was a different approach than hers, but one that made sense. She grabbed a few pieces of wood and handed them to him, her mind racing with ideas. Okay, we need to brace the rafters. If the wind picks up, the roof could give way, Grace suggested, remembering the stories her father had told her about the violent storms that had once ravaged their village. We'll need to work fast. Time is not on our side. Zektar nodded, his focus unwavering. Let's get to it then. I'll take the lead on the structural support, and you can oversee the roof patching. We can do this together. They moved quickly, the sound of the storm growing louder as they worked. Grace followed Zektar's lead, holding the beams in place while he secured them with bolts. The rain began to pound harder against the roof, the sound echoing in the small space. It felt like a race against time, each moment more urgent than the last. I've noticed you're quite handy with tools, Zektar commented, glancing at her with a smile. It's not something common in our society. Most of us rely on technology to do the work. Grace chuckled, wiping her brow with the back of her hand. And I've noticed you have a knack for strategy. You think several steps ahead, don't you? Survival requires it, he replied, his expression serious.
especially with storms like this. It's important to understand your environment and prepare accordingly.
As they continued to work, their conversation flowed naturally, revealing glimpses of their backgrounds and cultures. Grace shared stories of her childhood, how she had learned to fix things from her father, who had been a mechanic before her. Zektar opened up about his own upbringing, how he had been trained in the arts of logic and reasoning from a young age, his society valuing knowledge over hands-on skills. Sometimes, I think we could learn a lot from each other, Zektar mused, pausing for a moment to catch his breath. Your approach is refreshing. It reminds me that sometimes, you need to get your hands dirty to truly understand the world. Grace smiled at his words, a warmth spreading in her chest.
Maybe we can start a new trend. Humans and aliens working together, bridging the gap between our worlds.
The storm outside intensified, and the sound of the wind became a roar. Grace could see the trees bending under the pressure, the rain hitting the windows like a barrage of tiny missiles. We need to hurry, she urged, her heart racing again. If this keeps up, we might not finish in time. Zektar nodded, his expression serious.
Let's double our efforts. We're almost done. With renewed determination, they worked faster, Zektar supporting the framework while Grace climbed up to the roof, securing the loose shingles.
The rain dripped down her neck, but she didn't care. Adrenaline surged through her, and she could feel the resolve building within her. When she looked down, she saw Zektar glancing up at her, his eyes filled with encouragement. As she reached for the last shingle, a loud crack sounded from above, causing her to freeze. She looked up just in time to see a massive branch break off from a nearby tree, crashing down onto the roof. The force of it jolted her, and she stumbled back, barely catching herself on the edge of the roof.
Grace!
Zektar shouted, his voice laced with panic.
Are you all right?
I'm fine, she called back, though her heart was racing. The branch had barely missed her, but the danger was real.
Let's get down. We're running out of time.
They rushed back inside, and the storm howled around them, sounding almost like a living creature. Grace's heart pounded not just from the fear of the storm, but also from the unexpected thrill of working alongside Zektar. They had forged an alliance, one that transcended their cultural differences. As they stood together, bracing against the storm, Grace realized that perhaps this was exactly what she needed: connection, collaboration, and a reminder that even in the face of chaos, they could find strength in one another. You know, she said, her voice rising above the wind, if we survive this, we should do it again, work together, I mean.
Agreed, Zektar replied, a smile breaking through the tension. Let's see if we can make it through the night first.
With that, they turned their attention back to the task at hand, ready to face whatever the storm would throw at them next. Their bond was forming, a quiet understanding that even in the most turbulent of times, they could lean on each other. And as the wind howled outside, Grace felt a sense of hope blooming amidst the chaos, a belief that together, they could weather any storm. If you're enjoying this story, don't forget to subscribe to the channel. The storm had arrived in full force, the winds howling like a pack of wild beasts as they whipped through the trees surrounding Grace's small, rundown house. Rain pelted against the roof with increasing intensity, a relentless barrage that threatened to tear away at the very structure of her home. Inside, Grace and Zektar were a flurry of motion, working together to secure the house against the onslaught of nature's fury.
Hold that beam steady for me,
Grace shouted over the roar of the storm, her voice strained but determined. She was perched on a rickety ladder, one hand gripping the top rung while the other fumbled with the tools at her side. The smell of rain mixed with the musty scent of the attic, and Grace could feel the dampness creeping in. Zektar, steady as a rock despite the chaos around them, complied immediately.
I've got it.
Just be careful up there. His eyes, wide and focused, tracked her every movement, a mix of concern and admiration flickering within them.
Grace took a deep breath, steadying herself.
I've patched roofs before, Zektar.
I can do this.
She was trying to reassure herself as much as him. The last thing she wanted was to lose her footing and fall into the chaos below. The wind howled, almost mocking her bravado, and she tightened her grip on the shingles she was trying to secure. As she worked, Grace could feel the adrenaline coursing through her veins. This was more than just a roof repair, it was about survival. The stakes had never felt higher. With every piece of material she secured, she could hear the storm's fury intensifying outside, the sound resembling a wild animal thrashing against its cage. "We need to hurry," she called again, urgency creeping into her tone.
"If we don't finish this soon, we might regret it." Zektar nodded, his alien features illuminated by the intermittent flashes of lightning outside. "I can assist you in other ways," he offered, his voice steady. "I've seen how systems work in my home. Perhaps we can reinforce the structure from the inside as well." "Good thinking,"
Grace replied, her heart lifting slightly at his suggestion.
"Let's do that.
I'll finish up here, and then we can make sure the windows and doors are sealed tight." She continued to work, her hands moving mechanically as she focused on the shingles. As she secured the last piece, a loud crack echoed from outside. Grace froze, her heart racing as the sound sent a chill down her spine. "What was that?" she asked, dread pooling in her stomach. Zektar's eyes widened, and he rushed to the window, peering out into the torrential downpour.
"It sounded like a tree, it may have fallen." Panic laced his voice. "We need to assess the damage quickly."
Grace scrambled down the ladder, her feet hitting the floor with a thud.
"Let's go, then." They rushed to the door, adrenaline spurring them forward. The moment Zektar opened it, they were met with a wall of wind and rain that nearly knocked them back.
"Careful!" Zektar shouted, struggling to hold the door open against the onslaught. Grace positioned herself beside him, helping to brace the door as they ventured outside. The world beyond had transformed into a chaotic landscape, littered with debris and twisting branches.
"Over there."
Grace pointed toward a nearby tree, its massive trunk now lying across the path leading to the backyard. "We need to make sure nothing else is damaged." She felt a surge of determination as she stepped forward, the rain beating down on her relentlessly. They approached the fallen tree cautiously, the ground slippery and hazardous. Grace's heart raced as she scanned the area. "We need to make sure the roof is still intact. If that tree fell on the house, it could be catastrophic," she said, her voice barely audible over the storm. Zektar nodded, his expression serious. "I will help you assess the situation. We cannot assume anything until we see for ourselves." Together, they moved toward the house, their pace quickening as they neared the structure. As they reached the door, Grace hesitated, looking back at Zektar. "What if it's worse than we think?" she asked, fear creeping back in. "What if the roof didn't hold?" He turned to her, his gaze steady and reassuring. "Then we will fix it together. We are a team, remember? We've already accomplished so much." "Right," she said, taking a deep breath. "We'll face whatever comes next together." With that, they pushed through the door, stepping back into the relative safety of the interior. Inside, they were greeted by a shocking sight. The ceiling had developed a small leak, water dripping steadily onto the floor. Grace's heart sank. "No, not now," she whispered, feeling the weight of the situation pressing down on her. Zektar was quick to respond, his logical mind already assessing the issue. "We need to collect buckets to catch the water. Then we can patch the leak from above." He moved swiftly, opening cabinets and grabbing containers. "Good idea," Grace exclaimed, her spirits lifting slightly. She joined him, rummaging through her supplies as they worked to contain the growing problem. Each drop of water that fell felt like a ticking clock, reminding them of the urgency of their situation. After a few moments, they had gathered several buckets and placed them strategically under the leak. The sound of water splashing against metal filled the room, a stark reminder of the storm's destructive power. "Now what?" Grace asked, looking up at the ceiling. "We need to get back up there and figure out how to seal it properly." "I can hold the ladder for you," Zektar offered, his tone resolute. "Together, we will ensure this house remains standing." With a nod of gratitude, Grace climbed back up, her heart racing as she braced herself against the roof. The wind howled outside, threatening to pull her off balance. "Just a little more," she called down to Zektar, who stood with unwavering support below. As she worked to mend the leak, the storm raged on, each gust of wind and clap of thunder reinforcing the urgency of their task. Grace's hands moved swiftly, her mechanical skills shining through as she patched the hole with whatever materials she could find. Each time she glanced down, she saw Zektar's encouraging expression, which made her feel a little more courageous. With both of them working hard, there was a sense of camaraderie that grew between them, born from the necessity of the moment. The storm was fierce, but so was their resolve. Suddenly, a particularly strong gust rattled the house, and Grace lost her footing for a brief moment. "Whoa!" she yelped, feeling herself sway dangerously close to the edge. Zektar's eyes widened, and he reached out instinctively. "Grace," he shouted, panic lacing his voice. "Watch yourself." "I'm okay," she managed to call back, steadiness returning as she repositioned herself. "Just a little shaky." Zektar took a deep breath, his eyes never leaving her. "We can do this. Just focus." They continued to work in synchrony, the storm outside a reminder of their fragile situation. Each moment felt like a small victory, and with every shingle they secured, Grace felt a sense of hope growing within her. As the wind howled louder, she realized how important this connection with Zektar had become. They were not just two individuals from different worlds, they were partners now, facing the storm together. If you're enjoying this story, don't forget to subscribe to the channel. The storm outside grew more ferocious by the minute, its howling winds colliding with the walls of Grace's house like a battering ram. Inside, the atmosphere had shifted from tense anticipation to chaotic urgency, the small leak now a torrent of water streaming through the ceiling. Grace's heart sank as she looked around her living room, which was rapidly becoming a mini-lake. "Zektar, we need to act fast," she shouted, her voice barely rising above the cacophony of the storm. The sight of water pooling on the floor sent shivers down her spine. She had worked so hard to patch the roof, and now it felt as if everything was falling apart. Zektar, ever the quick thinker, grabbed a couple of old buckets from the corner and began placing them under the leak. "We can catch the water for now," he said, his voice steady despite the chaos. "Then we'll improvise a patch until the storm passes." Grace nodded, her mind racing through possible solutions. "We can use some duct tape and plastic sheeting I have in the garage. It might work temporarily." She dashed toward the door leading to the garage, her heart pounding with urgency. As she navigated through the house, the wind howled louder, rattling the windows. She could feel the storm's fury pressing against the walls as though it intended to break through. Grabbing the supplies she needed, she returned to the living room, where Zektar was already managing the buckets with surprising efficiency. "Let's get this leak sealed. The last thing we need is for the whole roof to give way," Grace exclaimed, trying to inject a sense of urgency into the moment. With Zektar's assistance, they set up a makeshift repair station on the floor. Grace laid out the plastic sheeting and duct tape, her hands trembling slightly from the adrenaline. "All right, if we can secure this over the leak, it might hold long enough for us to get through the worst of it." Zektar watched intently, his alien logic guiding him. "Let me assist you. I can help hold the sheeting in place while you secure it." "Thanks, Zektar." "Just hold it tightly," Grace instructed, taking a deep breath as she climbed onto a stool for better access to the ceiling. The wind outside picked up again, sending a shudder through the house. As she worked, Zektar's presence grounded her. "You know, I never thought I'd be up here sealing a roof during a storm," she said, trying to keep the mood light despite the chaos. "Strange circumstances often lead to unusual partnerships," Zektar replied, a hint of humor in his tone. "In my culture, we have a saying, when the storm rages, find the eye." Grace chuckled softly, appreciating the wisdom behind his words. "I suppose we are the eye of this storm then, huh?" "Indeed." "We must remain calm and focused," he replied, his eyes reflecting seriousness mixed with determination. With each piece of tape she applied, Grace felt a flicker of hope. The sound of rain pounding against the roof was relentless, but their teamwork began to create a small barrier against the fury outside. Suddenly, a loud crash echoed through the house, causing both of them to freeze. Instinctively, Grace looked toward the source of the sound, her heart racing. "What was that?" "I believe it came from outside," Zektar said, his voice low and cautious. "We should investigate." Grace climbed down from the stool, her heart pounding as they made their way to the door. Stepping outside, the wind whipped around them, and rain lashed against their faces. The world outside was a chaotic swirl of branches and debris. "Look!" Zektar pointed, a fallen tree now blocking the front of the house. The realization hit them both, there was no way out. Panic surged in Grace's chest. "We're trapped." "Not for long," Zektar reassured her, his tone firm. "We need to think clearly. We can clear the debris if we work together. But it's dangerous out there," Grace said, glancing at the tree, its branches swaying ominously in the wind. "Every challenge can be met with a solution." "We must find a way," Zektar insisted, his determination shining through even in such a dire moment. "Okay. Let's do it. We can use the tools in the garage," Grace said, her resolve hardening. They rushed back inside, the storm raging on, but their shared goal illuminated their path forward. Once in the garage, Grace quickly gathered a saw and a sturdy rope. "We can cut the branches and tie them down to remove them safely." Zektar took the saw, his alien hands surprisingly adept at handling the earth tool. "You can guide me. I'll follow your instructions." With a nod, Grace directed him on where to cut. "Just be careful. We don't want the tree to move unexpectedly." As they began to work, the storm raged on, but their focus kept them grounded. Grace could feel the tension between them shifting as they shared jokes and stories to lighten the mood. "You know, back on my planet, we have storms like this, but they don't last nearly as long as this one." Zektar chuckled. "It appears your planet has been spared from the true tempest." "Yeah, I guess we are lucky in that sense. But this place, it's home. I can't let it fall apart," she admitted, her voice growing serious. Zektar paused, looking her in the eyes. "You have fought hard to protect it. This is commendable." "You too," Grace replied, feeling a warmth spread through her. "I couldn't do this without you." They continued cutting and clearing debris, the adrenaline fueling their efforts. The storm roared around them, but their teamwork forged a bond that felt stronger than the wind. With every branch they moved, Grace felt a sense of accomplishment. Finally, after what felt like hours, they managed to free the door. Panting, they stepped back to admire their work. "Wow, we did it!" Grace exclaimed, a smile breaking across her face. "Indeed, we have," Zektar replied, a glimmer of pride in his eyes. But as they stood there, the storm still howled, and Grace realized this wasn't over yet. They would need to secure the house from the leaks, and now they had to consider the bigger picture, the entire neighborhood was at risk. "Let's check on the others," Grace suggested, her heart racing with urgency. Zektar nodded, determination set in his features. "Together, we will face whatever challenges lie ahead." If you're enjoying this story, don't forget to subscribe to the channel. It truly makes a difference and helps us share more of these adventures. With a shared glance of resolve, they stepped out into the stormy chaos, ready to tackle whatever awaited them. With the door blocked by the fallen tree, panic surged through Grace as she stared at the barrier that now trapped them inside. The storm outside howled like a banshee, and the sound echoed ominously in the small house. Zektar's cool demeanor was a stark contrast to the chaos around them, and Grace felt a flicker of hope in his steady presence. "We need to find a way out," she said, her voice tight with anxiety. "This is bad. Really bad." Zektar nodded, his brow furrowed in concentration. "Indeed. The tree seems to have fallen at an angle. If we can clear some branches, we might create an opening." Grace took a deep breath, the familiar smell of damp wood and rain filling her lungs. "But it's dangerous out there. What if more debris falls?" "Every challenge can be met with a solution," he replied, his tone firm. "We will proceed with caution." "Okay," Grace said, her heart still racing. "Let's do it. We can use the tools in the garage." They quickly moved toward the garage, each step filled with urgency. The garage was cluttered but familiar, filled with tools that Grace had used countless times. She rummaged through the shelves, her hands brushing against the cool metal of a saw and a heavy-duty rope. "We can cut away the branches and secure them so they don't fall on us," Zektar observed, his eyes scanning the array of tools. You have quite an impressive collection here, he remarked, picking up the saw with a surprising delicacy.
Thanks.
I've had to learn to do a lot on my own, Grace replied, a hint of pride creeping into her voice.
You ready for some teamwork?
Absolutely. Lead the way, he said, his expression earnest.
Together, they approached the door, and Grace pointed out the branches that needed trimming.
Start here, she instructed, and be careful with your cuts. If the tree shifts, we need to be ready to move. As Zektar began to work, she noticed the precision with which he handled the saw. You're a natural at this, she teased, trying to lighten the mood.
Maybe you should consider a career as a tree surgeon.
His lips curled slightly.
I will stick with my current profession, thank you. But I appreciate the sentiment.
The sound of the saw biting into wood mingled with the howling wind outside, creating a strange symphony of chaos and determination.
Grace felt an odd sense of camaraderie building between them.
You know, I've faced storms like this before, but never felt so trapped. Zektar paused in his work, looking at her with an intensity that made her heart flutter.
Trapped physically or emotionally?
Both, I guess. I've always felt a bit out of place here. Like I'm trying to hold everything together while the world around me is falling apart, she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper.
Your strength is commendable.
You fight for what is important to you, he said, his gaze unwavering. As they continued to cut away branches, the atmosphere shifted from one of panic to a shared understanding. They worked in rhythm, the physical exertion distracting them momentarily from the storm outside. With each branch they cleared, Grace felt a flicker of hope. But just as they were making progress, the wind picked up, howling louder, rattling the walls of the house.
Grace paused, looking toward the door. Did you hear that? It sounds like something else is about to fall.
We must hurry, Zektar said, urgency creeping into his voice. He resumed cutting, and Grace joined him, directing him as they worked side by side. Suddenly, a loud crack echoed through the air, followed by a deafening thud. Grace's heart dropped. What was that? I think we may have to move faster, Zektar said, his voice steady but his eyes betraying his concern. They quickened their pace, and Grace felt the weight of the storm pressing down on her. Just a few more branches, she urged, her hands shaking slightly. Focus, Zektar said, his tone calming. We can do this. You have faced storms before, yes? Yes, she replied, drawing strength from his words. I can do this. With a final cut, Zektar moved aside a large branch, and they both stepped back to survey their work. A small gap had opened, just wide enough for them to squeeze through. Now we just need to push this tree out of the way, Grace said, her breath coming in short bursts. I will assist, Zektar said, positioning himself beside her. Together, they braced against the tree trunk, pushing with all their might. The tree creaked ominously, and Grace felt her pulse quicken. On 3. 1, 2, 3. With a tremendous effort, they shoved the tree, and with a loud scrape, it shifted slightly, creating a wider gap. Keep pushing. Grace shouted, her adrenaline surging. They pushed again, and the tree moved another inch. Finally, with one last heave, it toppled to the side, creating an opening large enough for them to escape. Panting, Grace and Zektar stumbled back, their hearts racing. We did it! Grace exclaimed, an exhilarated smile lighting up her face. Indeed, we have, Zektar replied, his voice filled with pride. But as they took a moment to catch their breath, Grace's expression changed. We need to check on the others. The storm, it's not just us. Everyone is at risk. Zektar nodded, determination etched on his features. Yes. Together, we will face whatever challenges lie ahead. With a shared glance of resolve, they stepped into the stormy chaos outside. The wind whipped against their faces, and the rain soaked them to the bone, but Grace felt a renewed sense of purpose. She wasn't alone anymore, they were in this together. If you're enjoying this story, don't forget to subscribe to the channel. Your support means the world and helps us continue sharing these incredible stories. As they braved the elements, Grace held on to the hope that together, they could weather any storm, both outside and within. The storm had finally passed, but But the aftermath was a sight of devastation that left Grace with a heavy heart. The wind had howled like a feral beast throughout the night, and now, the remnants of its fury lay scattered across her neighborhood. Fallen branches, scattered debris, and a few entire trees uprooted created an eerie landscape she scarcely recognized. The fresh scent of wet earth mixed with the tang of broken wood filled the air, a reminder of nature's raw power. Grace stepped outside, her boots crunching on the twigs and leaves as she surveyed the destruction. The sight was overwhelming. It wasn't just her home that had been battered. Every house on the block bore the scars of the storm. As she moved cautiously through the wreckage, she could see Zektar following behind, his alien form contrasting sharply against the earthy tones of the landscape. His expression was a mixture of concern and determination, and Grace could sense he was grappling with his own instincts. "Look at this place," she said, shaking her head as she surveyed the scattered remnants of what had once been a vibrant community.
"It's like a war zone."
Zektar nodded, his eyes scanning the neighborhood.
"Yes, but we cannot succumb to despair. We must help those in need."
His voice held an edge of urgency, and Grace could feel a spark of motivation igniting within her. "I agree," she replied, her mind racing with possibilities.
"There are people out there who might need assistance." As if on cue, a distant cry for help reached her ears, faint yet unmistakable. It was a reminder that they weren't alone in this. "Did you hear that?" she asked, glancing at Zektar. "Indeed."
"We should investigate," he said, setting off in the direction of the sound with a purposeful stride. They navigated through the debris, Grace's heart pounding not just from the effort but from the realization that they had a responsibility to their community. She thought about the neighbors she had seen almost every day, exchanging smiles and small talk. They were friends, family in a way, and now they all needed each other more than ever. The two of them reached a nearby house, where a small crowd had gathered.
As they approached, Grace recognized Mrs. Lynn, an elderly woman who lived alone.
She was clutching her arm, her face pale and drawn with worry.
"What happened?"
Grace asked, rushing to her side. "A tree fell on my garage.
I think my cat is still inside,"
Mrs. Lynn exclaimed, her voice trembling.
"Don't worry, we'll get your cat out,"
Grace reassured her, glancing at Zektar.
"We need to find a way to lift the tree."
Zektar stepped forward, assessing the situation with his keen alien intellect. "If we can clear some of the lighter debris, we might be able to shift the tree without causing further damage."
Grace nodded in agreement. "Let's do it."
Working together, they began moving smaller branches and pieces of wood away from the garage. Grace focused on the task at hand, her hands moving instinctively as she cleared the space. Zektar's strength proved invaluable, and with each passing moment, the weight of responsibility felt lighter. Just as they cleared a path, the garage door creaked and swung open slightly, revealing a frightened pair of emerald eyes peering through the darkness.
"Whiskers!" Mrs. Lynn shouted, her face lighting up. "Hold on!" Grace called back, reaching the door. "We're coming for you."
Carefully, she pushed against the door as Zektar helped to steady it. "I will use my strength to lift the tree," he said, positioning himself beside it. The tree was large, but they had no other option.
Grace took a deep breath. "On the count of 3. 1, 2, 3.
With a heroic effort, Zektar heaved against the tree, and Grace felt the ground tremble slightly as it lifted.
"Now!" Grace shouted, scrambling towards the opening.
Whiskers darted out, a fluffy bundle of anxiety and fur, and landed safely in Mrs. Lynn's outstretched arms.
"You did it!"
Mrs. Lynn exclaimed, her eyes shining with gratitude.
Thank you, thank you."
But before Grace could bask in the moment, she felt a tremor beneath her feet. The wind picked up again, swirling around them like a vengeful spirit. "We need to be careful," she warned.
"The ground is unstable."
Zektar nodded, his alien senses sharper than any human's. "We should help others," he urged, scanning the area.
"There may be more in need."
"Right," Grace said, feeling the weight of their mission settle on her shoulders.
"Let's split up and see what we can do."
As they moved through the neighborhood, they encountered several others who needed help. From a family with a damaged roof to a couple whose car had been crushed under a fallen tree, the list of those in distress seemed endless. Yet, with each small act of assistance, Grace felt a sense of accomplishment blooming within her. They were not just fixing homes, they were rebuilding hope. After several hours of hard work, the sun began to peek through the clouds, casting a golden light over the devastation.
Grace paused to catch her breath, wiping sweat from her brow.
Zektar approached, carrying a heavy bag of tools he had retrieved from one of the houses. "You have a remarkable spirit, Grace," he said, his eyes reflecting the admiration he felt.
"It's just what we do, right?"
"We take care of our own," she replied, her heart swelling with pride for their community. As they continued, Grace felt the shift in their dynamic. What had started as a simple effort to patch a roof had transformed into a bonding experience, a journey through adversity that revealed the depths of their characters. Zektar's logical approach complemented her instinctual methods, creating a partnership that thrived amidst the chaos. The community began to gather in the park, the remnants of their homes barely visible in the background. They shared stories of survival, laughter mingling with tears. Grace felt a warmth spreading through the crowd as they celebrated the resilience they had shown. If you're enjoying this story, don't forget to subscribe to the channel. Your support helps us share more of these incredible journeys. As she stood among her neighbors, Grace realized that while the storm had wreaked havoc, it had also brought them closer together. They were a tapestry of lives intertwined, their differences woven into a shared purpose. Zektar stood beside her, reflecting the same sense of belonging she felt. Together, they had navigated the storm, and now, they were ready to face whatever came next. Hope blossomed in her chest, and for the first time in a long while, Grace felt truly at home. As the storm clouds began to dissipate, revealing the sun's soft rays peeking through the scattered mist, Grace stood amidst the debris of the neighborhood, surveying the damage. Her heart swelled with a mixture of relief and determination. The initial chaos had transformed into a collective effort of resilience as neighbors emerged to assess the aftermath of the storm. The air was thick with the scent of damp earth and freshly fallen leaves, a reminder of the tempest that had just raged through their lives. Grace turned to Zektar, who was busy gathering tools from the makeshift pile they had created earlier.
"What do you think?
Should we check on the others?" she asked, her voice laced with purpose. Zektar nodded, his keen eyes scanning the area.
"Yes, I believe that is a wise course of action.
Community is essential for recovery." His logical approach always intrigued Grace, reminding her of how different their worlds were yet how alike they had become in the face of adversity. Together, they set off down the street, where the remnants of the storm lingered in the form of fallen branches and debris scattered across yards. As they walked, Grace couldn't help but notice the sight of neighbors helping one another, their faces illuminated with a sense of camaraderie that seemed to grow in the aftermath of the storm. It was a beautiful sight, one that made her heart race with pride for her community. They approached the Lin family's home, where Mrs. Lin was attempting to lift a large branch off her porch. The sight was both comical and concerning, as she struggled against the weight of the wood.
"Mrs. Lin, let us help,"
Grace called out, hurrying over with Zektar right behind her.
"Oh, Grace, thank you. This thing just fell out of nowhere," Mrs. Lin exclaimed, wiping sweat from her forehead. "I don't know how I'll manage to fix the roof now."
"Don't worry, we'll figure it out together," Grace assured her, kneeling alongside Mrs. Lin to assess the situation. Zektar, with his strength, positioned himself on the opposite side of the branch, ready to help lift it. On three, Grace instructed, and with a shared grunt of effort, they hoisted the branch off the porch. It landed with a thud, and Mrs. Lin sighed in relief. "You two are lifesavers. I don't know what I would do without you," she said, her voice trembling with gratitude. Grace smiled, feeling the warmth of connection that had blossomed through their shared experiences.
"It's what neighbors are for, right?"
As they stood there, an idea sparked in Grace's mind.
"Hey, why don't we gather everyone and organize a community cleanup effort?
We can help each other fix our homes and clear the debris." The thought excited her, and she could see Zektar's expression shift to one of interest.
Zektar tilted his head slightly, his alien features illuminating with curiosity.
"A collective effort? That is a highly efficient method for restoration.
I support this plan." Great! Then let's get the word out.
Grace said, her energy infectious as she began to walk through the neighborhood, calling out to anyone who would listen.
Everyone! We're organizing a neighborhood cleanup. Meet at the park in half an hour.
As people began to gather, Grace felt a surge of excitement. She watched as families emerged from their homes, many still shaking off the remnants of fear from the storm. And just like that, they transformed from individuals into a united front, ready to tackle the challenges ahead. If you're enjoying this story, don't forget to subscribe to the channel. Your support helps us share more journeys like this one. The park quickly filled with familiar faces. Zektar stood beside her, translating and facilitating communication among the various community members.
Grace took the lead, outlining the plan. We'll break into teams. Each group will tackle a specific area of the neighborhood.
We can share tools and resources.
Together, we can restore everything.
The crowd nodded in agreement, their spirits lifting as they realized they were not alone in this struggle. The atmosphere shifted from one of despair to one of hope and determination. As they formed teams, Grace found herself paired with Zektar, which felt both comforting and empowering. They set off to help the Johnson family, whose roof was badly damaged. The Johnsons were a young couple with 2 small children, and Grace could see the worry etched on their faces.
"Thank you for coming, Mr.
Johnson said, his voice heavy with concern.
"We're not sure how we're going to fix this."
"Don't worry, we're here to help," Grace assured him. "Zektar is great with heavy lifting, and I have some tools that we can use." Zektar, hearing her mention of tools, nodded enthusiastically. "I possess an array of techniques for handling structural repairs."
"Allow me to demonstrate."
Grace watched as Zektar began to assess the damage, his analytical mind working through the possibilities. He pointed out areas that needed immediate attention while also recommending ways to reinforce the structure. "Grace, if we apply a support beam here, we can stabilize the entire roof," Zektar suggested, drawing in the dirt with a stick to illustrate his point.
"Wow, that's brilliant!" Grace exclaimed, impressed by his logical approach. "Let's get to work." As they worked together, Grace couldn't help but admire the way Zektar's mind operated.
His alien perspective brought a unique flavor to their problem-solving, and she felt their partnership growing stronger. The hours flew by as they labored side by side, laughter echoing through the air amidst the sound of hammers and saws. Grace felt a sense of fulfillment wash over her each time they completed a task, each nail driven another step towards rebuilding their community. Eventually, they stepped back to admire their work. The Johnsons' roof was now secure, and the children played happily in the yard, their laughter ringing like music to Grace's ears.
"Thank you so much,"
Mrs. Johnson said, tears of gratitude in her eyes.
"You don't know how much this means to us."
"Just doing our part," Grace replied, her heart swelling with joy. They were not just fixing roofs, they were restoring hope, weaving a tapestry of resilience that connected them all.
As they continued their work throughout the neighborhood, each house they visited told a story of struggle and perseverance.
Grace felt the fabric of their community strengthen with every shared effort. She and Zektar had become a symbol of hope, bridging the gap between their 2 worlds. The day faded into evening, and the sun dipped below the horizon, casting a golden glow over the neighborhood. Grace felt a profound sense of belonging. They had come together not just to fix their homes, but to reinforce the bonds of community. As they gathered in the park once more, everyone shared stories of their day, laughter mingling with the warm evening air. Grace beamed at Zektar, who looked equally content. They had faced the storm, and now, they were standing stronger than ever. It was a moment of triumph, a reminder that together, they could weather any storm. As Grace and Zektar continued to help their neighbors, a growing sense of camaraderie enveloped the community. Together, they shared laughter and stories, each person contributing their strengths to the daunting task of rebuilding. But just as the atmosphere began to feel lighter, a sudden commotion from a few houses down drew their attention. "Over there," a voice shouted, breaking through the chatter. Grace turned to see Mrs. Thompson, her neighbor, looking frantic.
"The Millers. They're trapped inside. A tree has fallen across their front door."
Fear gripped Grace's heart as she exchanged a quick glance with Zektar.
Without a word, they rushed towards the Miller home, weaving through debris and fallen branches.
The sight that met their eyes was distressing. A massive tree, roots torn from the earth, had crashed down, effectively sealing the Millers inside their home. "We need to help them," Grace declared, her voice steady despite the urgency of the situation. She could feel the adrenaline coursing through her veins, igniting her determination.
"Zektar, can you assist me in lifting the branches?"
"Certainly," Zektar replied, his expression serious yet focused. He approached the fallen tree, assessing its weight and structure.
"We must be strategic.
If we lift it from the trunk, we can avoid further damaging the house and potentially injuring those inside." Grace nodded, appreciating his logical approach. "I'll find something to secure it once we get it off the door. If we can just create enough space." She sprinted back to her mechanic's toolbox, rifling through it for anything that could help.
As Grace searched, she couldn't shake the feeling of urgency that pressed against her chest.
The Millers were a young couple with a small child. She could only imagine the panic they must be feeling.
"Grace."
Zektar's voice broke through her thoughts.
"I need you here."
She dashed back to his side, where he was already bracing himself against the tree. "On 3, we lift," he instructed, his eyes locked onto hers. "Got it," she replied, taking a deep breath to steady her nerves.
1, 2, 3.
They heaved together, their bodies straining against the weight of the tree. Grace focused on the sound of her own breath, the rhythm of it fueling her strength. With a groan, the tree began to shift, just enough to create a small gap.
"Now! Quick!"
Zektar urged, and Grace dove into the space they had created, reaching for the door handle. It was locked, and her heart sank for a moment. "It's locked," she shouted, panic creeping into her voice.
"Stand back," Zektar commanded.
With a swift motion, he pushed against the trunk even harder, lifting it slightly higher. Grace quickly grabbed a sturdy, old tire iron from her toolbox and wedged it against the door jamb. With a grunt, Zektar lifted one more time, and Grace pushed the door with all her strength, just enough to get it open.
"Go! Get them out," she yelled. Inside, the Millers were huddled in the corner, wide-eyed and terrified. "We thought we were going to die," Mrs. Miller cried, rushing towards the door. "Come on, we've got you," Grace said, holding out her hand.
The Millers scrambled towards her, and Grace felt a rush of relief wash over her as they emerged from the dark confines of their home. Just as they stepped outside, a loud crack echoed through the air, and Grace turned to see another branch fall from the tree, landing where they had just been standing. "Move," she shouted, pulling the Millers behind her as Zektar quickly shifted his position to help support the tree again.
"We need to get out of here before it falls again."
The Millers stumbled back, panic-stricken, but Grace kept her voice calm.
"Just stay close to me. We're going to get through this." With Zektar's help, they moved away from the house, leading the Millers to safety just as another loud crash sounded.
The tree trembled ominously, but they were clear of danger now. Once they were out of harm's way, Grace took a moment to catch her breath. She looked at the Millers, who were now huddled together, shaking.
"You're safe now. We're going to help you." Thank you.
Mr. Miller gasped, tears in his eyes.
"We thought we'd never get out of there." "It's all right.
You're safe now," Grace reassured him, her heart swelling with pride as she watched Zektar kneel beside Mrs. Miller, offering her a comforting smile.
"Is everyone okay?" Zektar asked with genuine concern, glancing around at the gathered crew. "Just shaken, Mrs. Miller replied, her voice trembling. "But we're okay."
Grace felt a rush of gratitude wash over her.
They had done it.
Together, they had faced danger and come out the other side, and it had deepened the bond between them all.
"We need to get you some water and check for injuries. Let's head back to the park."
As they made their way back, Grace noticed how the community had come alive again. Neighbors were helping each other, assessing damages, and sharing resources.
It was a reminder that they were all in this together.
"If you're enjoying this story, don't forget to subscribe to the channel," she called out to the onlookers. It felt good to know that their story would inspire others.
"We really owe you too," Mr. Miller said, his voice full of gratitude. "I don't know what we would have done without your help."
"Just doing what anyone would do," Grace replied with a smile, but she felt a warm glow inside. It was more than just doing the right thing, it was about building connections and finding strength in vulnerability. As they reached the park, Grace looked over at Zektar, who was talking with the other neighbors. His logical approach complemented her instinctual nature, and together they made a formidable team. It was clear that their friendship had transformed into something deeper, forged through shared experiences and a mutual respect for each other's strengths.
"Ready for the next challenge?" Zektar asked with a grin, and Grace couldn't help but laugh. "Absolutely. Let's see what else we can do."
With determination in their hearts, they prepared to face whatever challenges lay ahead, knowing they had built a foundation that could withstand any storm, together. As the chaotic aftermath of their rescue settled into a tense silence, Grace and Zektar stood momentarily frozen, absorbing the gravity of what they had just done. The air was thick with the scent of wet earth and rain-soaked wood, while the sky continued to rumble in the distance, a constant reminder that the storm was still very much present. They had freed the Millers from their trapped home, but the experience had left them all shaken.
"Are you all right?"
Grace asked, her voice soft but firm, turning towards the Millers, whose faces were pale with fear. Zektar, still catching his breath, glanced at Mrs. Miller, who was wringing her hands, her eyes wide. We thought we wouldn't make it," Mrs. Miller stammered, her voice trembling.
Thank you so much."
"It was nothing, really," Zektar replied, though there was a hint of pride in his tone.
"Just a quick decision and some teamwork." Grace caught his eye and smiled, grateful for his humility.
He had never been one to seek out praise, but in that moment, it was clear that their bond had strengthened through the challenge they faced together.
The moment of relief quickly faded into urgency as they looked around at the devastation wrought by the storm.
Trees were uprooted, debris littered the streets, and the sound of distant sirens hinted at the chaos unfolding across the neighborhood. They all needed to act, and fast. "Let's head back to the park," Grace suggested, taking charge. "There might be others who need help." She felt a sense of responsibility wash over her, igniting a spark of determination deep within. Zektar nodded, falling into step beside her, while the Millers shuffled closely behind, their expressions still reflecting a mix of gratitude and shock. As they traversed the muddy paths, Grace noticed the community gathering in the park, where neighbors were setting up makeshift aid stations and assessing damages. The sight filled her with hope. They were resilient, and together, they would face whatever challenges lay ahead. The air buzzed with activity, punctuated by the clamor of voices and the occasional laughter, a stark contrast to the silence that had gripped them moments before. "Wow, look at everyone coming together," Zektar remarked, his eyes scanning the scene.
"It's impressive how quickly they mobilized."
"It's the best part of our community," Grace replied, her heart swelling with pride. "We may have our differences, but when it counts, we all pitch in." A few familiar faces caught her attention, a neighbor from down the street, a couple of kids who often played in her yard. She waved at them, and they returned her greeting with relieved smiles. As they reached the park, Grace felt an unexpected rush of energy. "If you're enjoying this story, don't forget to subscribe to the channel," she called out to the gathered crowd, her voice carrying above the din. She couldn't help but feel a connection with her audience, even in this dire situation. "All right, what do we have?" she asked, scanning the area for any immediate needs.
"Are there injuries? Supplies needed?"
"I can check for injuries," Zektar offered, instinctively moving towards a group of kids huddled with their parents. His logical mind kicked in, and he began assessing the situation systematically, while Grace turned her attention to the adults and began gathering information. The energy in the park shifted as more people arrived, bringing food, water, and supplies. Grace worked alongside her neighbors, organizing resources and ensuring everyone had what they needed. She felt a sense of camaraderie with the people around her, their shared purpose creating a powerful bond. "Grace! Over here," a voice called out. She turned to see Sarah Thompson, her neighbor who owned the local bakery, rushing towards her, hands full of bread and pastries.
"I thought these might help."
"Perfect.
Thank you, Sarah,"
Grace replied, grateful for the support. As they distributed the food, she felt a sense of normalcy return, even amidst the chaos. The smell of freshly baked bread wafted through the air, mingling with the scent of wet grass, creating an oddly comforting atmosphere. But just as they began to feel a sense of achievement, the ground shook slightly, a reminder that the storm had not fully passed. Grace's heart raced as she turned to Zektar, who had been helping an elderly neighbor. "We need to stay alert," she said, her voice low but urgent.
"There might be more risks out here than we realize."
Zektar nodded, his expression serious.
"We should check the homes for anyone who might still be trapped. It's possible some didn't get out in time."
His eyes met hers, and they shared an unspoken understanding. They were in this together, and they would not rest until everyone was safe.
"Let's split up and cover more ground.
I'll take the north side, you take the south?" Grace suggested, her mind racing with plans and possibilities.
"Agreed.
"I'll meet you back here in an hour," Zektar replied, already moving toward a group of neighbors gathered at a nearby house. As she made her way through the neighborhood, Grace felt a mix of emotions. There was fear, yes, but also determination and hope. She knocked on the first door she came to, her heart pounding.
"Hello? Is anyone home?" No response.
She moved to the next house, repeating her calls, feeling the weight of responsibility on her shoulders. Her hands were clammy, but she pushed through, knowing that every second counted. Suddenly, she heard a faint whimper from inside one of the homes. Her heart raced as she rushed to the door, pounding on it.
"Is anyone in there? I'm here to help."
The whimper turned into a muffled voice.
"Please, help us." Grace's heart sank.
She quickly dug her shoulder into the door, forcing it open. As it swung wide, she was met with the sight of a small family huddled together, fear etched on their faces.
"You're safe now," she exclaimed, rushing in to assist them. "Let's get you out of here."
As she helped them up, she felt a rush of adrenaline. This was why she had come, this was what mattered. "Come on, we need to hurry," she urged as they made their way back outside, the remnants of the storm still swirling around them. Together, they stepped into the light, breathing a sigh of relief as they joined the community that had already begun to come together. With each small victory, Grace felt her heart grow lighter, and her resolve deepen. This was her home, her community, and she would do everything in her power to help them rebuild. As the sun peeked through the clouds, illuminating the chaos, Grace realized that together, they could weather any storm. And as she rejoined Zektar, she couldn't help but feel that their bond had grown even stronger. They were no longer just neighbors or friends, they were partners united by purpose, prepared to face whatever came next.
"Let's keep going,"
Grace said with renewed vigor, ready to tackle whatever challenges lay ahead, knowing they would face them together, side by side. As the sun began to peek through the dissipating clouds, Grace and Zektar stood among the remnants of the storm. The neighborhood was a tapestry of destruction and resilience, with scattered branches and debris lining the streets. The air was thick with the scent of damp earth and fresh wood, and the sound of distant hammers echoed as neighbors assessed the damage and began their repairs. Grace felt a wave of gratitude wash over her. They had made it through the worst, and now it was time to reflect on what they had achieved together.
"Can you believe it?"
Grace said, her voice filled with awe as she looked around at the community that had come together.
"After everything, we're still standing."
Zektar nodded, his usual logical demeanor softened by the warmth of the moment.
"Indeed.
It is remarkable how a shared experience can bring individuals together." His eyes scanned the scene, taking in the camaraderie blossoming among their neighbors.
"Your leadership was essential.
Without your determination to help others, many would have struggled alone." Grace shrugged, a hint of modesty in her demeanor.
"I just did what anyone would do in a situation like this.
I didn't want to sit around while others needed help." She felt a swell of pride, remembering the families they had rescued and the efforts to gather supplies.
"But it's not just me, it's all of us working together."
"True," Zektar replied, a smile breaking through his usually serious expression. "But your instinct to act, to lead, is a quality that is often overlooked. I have learned much from observing you." She chuckled softly, brushing a strand of hair from her face. "Maybe I should charge you for a leadership workshop, then."
Zektar raised an eyebrow, a glimmer of humor in his eye. I would be interested in attending.
Your methods may appear chaotic to some, but they yield results. Grace smiled, appreciating the sincerity behind his words. Their bond had grown from mere neighbors to allies, each teaching the other valuable lessons. Maybe next time we can save a few trees together instead of just dodging them, she joked, her eyes sparkling with mischief. As they walked through the neighborhood, they exchanged stories, their laughter mingling with the sounds of hammers and chatter. The community had come alive, with people checking on one another, sharing food, and lending tools. Grace felt the warmth of connection, an energy that seemed to pulse through the air like the distant echoes of the storm that had just passed. "Hey, Grace!" Sarah Thompson called out, waving from her front porch, her hands covered in flour. "Come here. I made some fresh pastries for everyone. Count me in." Grace replied enthusiastically, her stomach rumbling at the thought of warm pastries. She turned to Zektar, who watched curiously. "You're going to love this." As they reached Sarah's porch, the smell of baked goods enveloped them, pulling at their senses. The warm, sweet aroma was a stark contrast to the chaos outside. "I thought everyone could use a treat after all that," Sarah beamed, placing a tray of freshly baked croissants on the table. Zektar examined the pastries with intrigue. "What are these?" he asked, his head tilting slightly, a gesture that reminded Grace of a curious child. "Croissants," Grace replied, her eyes lighting up. "They're made from layers of dough and butter. You're going to love them." Zektar picked one up, inspecting it closely. "It appears delicate." He took a tentative bite, his expression shifting from curiosity to delight. "This is extraordinary." Grace laughed as Zektar continued savoring the pastry. "I didn't know you were such a food critic." "Food is a universal language. It transcends cultural boundaries," he said thoughtfully, finishing the croissant. "I find that sharing a meal fosters understanding." "Exactly. It's all about connection," Grace replied, her heart swelling at the realization of how far they had come. Over croissants, they talked about their hopes for the community and how they could help each other rebuild. "Grace," Zektar began, his expression turning serious, "I wanted to express my gratitude for your bravery during the storm. You acted without hesitation, and it inspired those around you." Feeling the weight of his words, Grace met his gaze. "Thank you, Zektar. But we all played a part. I couldn't have done it without your help." He nodded, but a thoughtful look crossed his face. "I still struggle with my own instincts. My first reaction is often to retreat and analyze, yet your intuition led us to safety. You have a lot to offer too. Your logical approach saved us. It's just a different way of looking at things. We balance each other out," Grace reassured him. "Perhaps," he mused. "Your willingness to take risks where I would hesitate is admirable. I am learning to embrace that aspect of humanity." Grace felt a surge of warmth at his words. "We're both learning. That's what makes us a good team." Just then, a loud crash echoed through the neighborhood, causing them both to turn toward the source. A nearby tree had fallen, blocking the path to the community center. "I hope no one was hurt," Grace exclaimed, instinctively moving toward the sound. "Let's check it out," Zektar agreed, his eyes narrowing with determination. They hurried toward the center, joining a cluster of neighbors gathering to assess the situation. All around them, people were already mobilizing, assessing injuries and sharing tools. Grace felt a rush of adrenaline as she jumped into action, coordinating the rescue efforts. "We need to clear the tree, let's get everyone involved," she shouted. Zektar quickly moved to help others, using his strength to lift branches and clear debris. Grace could see the determination in his movements, a newfound confidence blossoming through their shared experiences. As they worked, Grace glanced over at Zektar, a sense of pride swelling within her. She could see the change in him. He was no longer just the logical neighbor who lived down the street. He had become a vital part of their community, a friend who shared her vision of resilience. "Grace," someone called out. It was Sarah, her face flushed with effort. "We need more hands here." "On it!" Grace shouted back, her heart racing. Together, they pushed forward, working side by side with their neighbors to clear the path and restore a sense of normalcy. In the midst of the chaos, Grace felt a renewed sense of purpose. They were not just repairing a neighborhood, they were rebuilding connections, forging bonds that would last far beyond the storm. As night began to fall, casting a soft glow over the neighborhood, Grace stood back to admire their work. The path was clear, and laughter filled the air as people shared stories of resilience and hope. Zektar joined her, wiping sweat from his brow. "It is incredible what we can achieve together," he said, a hint of awe in his voice. "Yeah," Grace replied, her heart swelling with pride. "And this is just the beginning." As they looked out over the community, Grace realized how much they had all grown. Together, they had faced the storm and emerged stronger, more connected, and ready to tackle whatever lay ahead. "Let's keep this spirit alive," Grace said, turning to Zektar. "We need to keep helping each other, not just now, but always." Zektar nodded, his gaze steady and determined. "I agree. Together, we can weather any storm." And as their laughter mingled with the sounds of celebration around them, Grace knew that the bonds forged through adversity would only grow stronger in the days to come. If you're enjoying this story, don't forget to subscribe to the channel. As the stars began to twinkle overhead, Grace felt a spark of hope ignite within her heart. The future was uncertain, but one thing was clear: they would face it together, side by side, ready to embrace whatever challenges awaited them. As the dust settled and the last remnants of the storm dissipated into the gentle breeze, Grace Kim stood at the center of her neighborhood, gazing at the aftermath of their collective efforts. The sun peeked through the clouds, casting a warm golden light on the once tattered landscape, now marked by resilience and hope. The roof she had patched just days before now gleamed under the bright rays, a testament to her unwavering spirit and determination. Zektar, the alien neighbor who had once seemed so distant and different, stood beside her, equally mesmerized by the transformed scene. "It's remarkable, isn't it?" he said, his voice tinged with awe. "The way this community came together. I had never imagined that we could achieve something so significant." Grace nodded, her heart swelling with pride. "It's all about the connections we built. I think we learned so much from each other through this experience." She turned to look at him, noticing the change in his demeanor. Gone was the hesitant figure she had first met, in his place stood a confident partner, ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead. "Your instincts, Grace. They guided us when logic failed," Zektar remarked, a hint of admiration evident in his tone. "I had always viewed problem solving through a lens of analysis, but you taught me the value of intuition and community." "Thanks, Zektar. But it was your strength and perspective that made a real difference." Grace smiled, remembering their frantic moments during the storm, when every decision felt like a step into the unknown. "We balanced each other out, and that made us a strong team." As they exchanged words, a small group of neighbors approached with smiles and waves, their faces still flushed from the hard work. Sarah, who had been instrumental in organizing the rescue efforts, stepped forward. "You two were amazing during the storm. We couldn't have done it without you both." Grace felt a rush of warmth at the acknowledgement. It was a team effort. "Everyone played their part," she replied, glancing at Zektar, who nodded in agreement. "Indeed," Zektar added, a smile brightening his features. "If only we could capture this spirit every day." "Maybe we can," Grace suggested, her mind racing with possibilities. "Let's keep the momentum going. We can organize regular community events, workshops, and even disaster preparedness trainings. We could all learn from one another, share skills, and strengthen our bonds." The enthusiasm in her voice was contagious. Sarah's eyes sparkled with excitement. "That's a fantastic idea. I can help with the planning. We could hold cooking classes, repair workshops, and art sessions for kids. There's so much we can do together." As they brainstormed, Grace caught sight of a little girl, Brix, who was busy drawing with chalk on the pavement. The colorful doodles brightened the otherwise simple gray concrete, and it struck her how this simple act of creativity embodied the spirit of renewal. "Look at Brix," she pointed out. "Even the kids are finding joy again." Zektar leaned in closer, observing the little artist at work. "It is beautiful. Children have an extraordinary ability to find light in darkness.
He paused, then added, perhaps we should create a community mural, using the talents of all the children. It could symbolize our unity and resilience. I love that.
Grace beamed, feeling a flood of inspiration.
It would be a great way to show how far we've come, and how we're all in this together.
As they continued to envision a vibrant future for their community, Grace felt deeply grateful for the bonds they had forged. The struggles they faced during the storm had not only brought them together but had fostered an understanding and appreciation for each other's strengths.
Grace, I want to thank you again for everything, Zektar said, sincerity radiating from him. Your courage inspired me to step outside my comfort zone, and now I feel part of something truly special.
Thank you, Zektar.
And remember, it's not just about courage, it's about connection. We've built something here that can last.
Grace smiled, her heart full, knowing that this moment was just the beginning of a new chapter in their lives. Just then, the sound of laughter erupted from the group of neighbors, and Grace turned to see a couple of families gathering for an impromptu picnic.
Blankets spread out, laughter echoed, and the aroma of freshly made food wafted through the air.
It was as if the storm had washed away not just the debris, but also the barriers that once separated them.
Come on, Zektar.
Let's join them, Grace said, grabbing his arm playfully.
This is our moment to celebrate.
As they made their way to the gathering, Grace felt a sense of belonging wash over her. She was surrounded by people who had once been mere acquaintances, now transformed into friends and allies. Each person contributed a unique thread to the fabric of their community. They settled onto a blanket, and Grace was soon swept up in the joyful conversations, sharing stories and laughter with her neighbors. Zektar, too, engaged with the group, sharing tales from his home planet, much to the delight of the children who hung on his every word. That evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in hues of orange and purple, Grace couldn't help but reflect on the journey that had brought them all together. The storm had been fierce and unforgiving, but it had also served as a catalyst for transformation. We did it, she whispered, half to herself and half to Zektar, who was beside her, enjoying the festivities.
Yes, we did, he replied, his voice steady with conviction. And we will continue to do more together.
As the laughter echoed through the air, Grace felt a spark of hope for the future. They had not only patched roofs and cleared debris, they had woven a community that would withstand any storm that came their way.
As the night deepened and stars twinkled overhead, Grace resolved to keep the spirit of unity alive.
If you're enjoying this story, don't forget to subscribe to the channel, she called out to the gathering, inviting everyone to join in their journey of connection and resilience. Together, they had faced the storm, and together they would thrive. The future was bright, and with each step forward, they would grow stronger, hand in hand, ready to embrace whatever came next.